Well, an executive order signed by President Obama has sparked controversy on both sides of the political aisle. The National Defense Resources Preparedness Executive Order was signed quietly Friday night. It gives the president the power to control U.S. resources in times of war and peace, and this includes food, water, oil, and transportation. Now, some are concerned this could lead to the executive branch having absolute authority over the nation's resources, and others question if this is all in preparation to go to war with Iran. Here's White House Press Secretary Jay Carney's answer to that question at a press conference.
Some online commentary suggesting this gives the executive branch power to allocate energy, food, water in either peacetime or wartime. And there are some conservative blogs that are pushing the notion that this suggests the White House is preparing for a war with Iran. Can you explain what this executive order was?
Well, I cannot explain that reaction to it. I think it was a fairly standard and routine piece of business.
So is this just business as usual, or does it give the executive branch an unprecedented amount of power? Well, I'm joined now by Charlie McGrath, founder of WideAwakeNews.com, to look deeper into this. Welcome to the show, Charlie. So we just heard the White House Press Secretary Jay Carney there. He's kind of downplaying this, saying it's no big deal. But should Americans be alarmed about this executive order?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think we should be alarmed about this executive order, as well as, legislation that has been rammed through Congress and or executive orders that we've seen in the last several years. But this truly goes all the way back to 9/11 and the Patriot Act. Ever since then, we've seen one piece of liberty-destroying legislation or another, the latest, of course, being this executive order. Absolutely. If you read this thing, they can allocate the resources, they can commandeer resources and equipment and personnel, wartime or peacetime. It reads like a cheap military novel on how a government could take over and declare martial law and impose it with the authority of an executive order as cover.
And talk about the significance of that, because similar orders have been signed by previous presidents. But what really separates this apart from the other ones is the fact that he can exercise these powers in war and peacetime. So what does that mean? When can he exercise absolute authority? It seems like it's not necessarily just in times of emergency, or what does this all mean?
Well, it's a really good question, Liz, and I think that's why we're talking about it. We know that Eric Holder has just rationalized killing American citizens. They sent Hellfire missiles in order to get rid of computer rabble-rousers. That was Al-Awlaki's title before they made him some kind of leader in Al-Qaeda, before they murdered him. So we don't know. We don't know what the executive branch, how they can exercise this authority that they're giving himself. But I think it's clear, and it should be clear to everybody, even the people who are sold out that the government is righteous and the government is doing everything on their behalf. If we look at just the past 4 or 5 years worth of legislation and executive orders, it paints a pretty grim picture of what has happened to this once great republic.
Now, you heard earlier we heard the press secretary, White House press secretary Jay Carney. He kind of laughed at the fact that this could be used in preparation for war with Iran. Do you think that this could be part of the picture, that could be the motivation behind the order?
Well, that's a great question, Liz, and that is what we should be asking. Why? Why do we need things like this executive order? Why do we need things like National Defense Authorization Act 2012? Why do we need legislation that prevents people from protesting or make it a federal crime? Does the government understand and realize that we're heading into a lot harder, more difficult times than we already are in right now? So do they need this legislation in place so they can put the boot heel of a tyrannical government on a people who are pushing back? So, I mean, it's a good question, and I guess time will bear out what all these puzzle pieces are put into place for.
Now, another thing that is raising eyebrows is the timing of this order. It was signed late Friday night before St. Patrick's Day. Do you find the timing strange?
Absolutely, absolutely. But we've seen that a lot over the last several years, where pieces of legislation, or as they say in Washington, where sausage will be made behind closed doors, they'll come out and then try to sell it as a good thing for the nation. But inevitably, when liberty is stolen from the people of this country, it is done behind closed doors when, most people are out enjoying something in the pop culture.
And this legislation obviously has major implications for the rights of all U.S. citizens, but we aren't hearing much about it in the mainstream news. Why not?
I'll fall back on the standard answer, which is, you have a handful of corporations that control 80 to 90% of the news that's disseminated through either print or computer or television, and absolutely there's an agenda around that reporting of the news. And I think that's why, the things that are sensationalized are often trivial and meaningless to the future of this country, at least to the future of the individuals in this country, and the damning pieces of legislation get a pass. It's absolutely insane. And, we see the same thing from legislation to the political arena. You alluded to it in the earlier clip with how Ron Paul is forgot by the mainstream media. So, it's not surprising at all. These things that are being done to usurp our freedom, usurp our liberty, destroy the Constitution, the mainstream media, in my opinion, is somewhat culpable for giving it pass on all these pieces of legislation.
Now, Charlie, we're seeing things like the National Defense Authorization Act. Recently, this bill proposed this anti-protest bill, which restricts how people can protest, where they can protest. Now we're seeing an executive order like this. With all this culminating, what do you think it has to say about the administration and what this means for fundamental rights, Americans' fundamental rights?
The fundamental rights are gone. If you think you live in a country that's governed by a constitution, wake up, because you don't. The fact of the matter is, you and I, having this conversation over the internet broadband, I could be labeled a belligerent actor because I'm speaking out against my government. Because of the authorization of National Defense Authorization Act 2012, I could be black bagged, drug off to Guantanamo, and gotten rid of. That is a terrifying prospect in this once land of the free.
And Charlie, why do you think something like this, we're not hearing too much about it, very controversial, but yet something like this we're not hearing too much outrage over it?
Well, we're hearing outrage. What's funny? We have groups that we're supposed to associate with the far left, like NAACP, protesting to the UN about our election process. You do have a very large number of people that are not being reported on, that are awake in alternative media, with media like RT, that are protesting and they are speaking out. But it's, if it doesn't have a voice on the mainstream media, then unfortunately the vast majority of the people don't hear the message. But as we continue to march forward, Liz, and I think this is the one reason why we have this legislation in place, we are going to see an expansion of the Occupy movement. We're going to see an expansion of frustration in this country because economically things are not getting better. Militarily, we're still projecting ourselves around the world. And now we have the government with the tools in place to basically tell us to shut up and take it or else.
Charlie, thank you very much for coming on the show. Pleasure to have you on as always. That was Charlie McGrath, founder of WideAwakeNews.com.